Hello everyone, and welcome back to my tutorial campaign series in Realistic Progression 0, the campaign mod for the Realism Overhaul suite of realism mods for Kerbal Space Program. In the last episode, we recovered a camera film from orbit, giving us lots and lots of science. And in this episode, we're going to do another Earth orbital mission, this time, however, in high orbit. We're going to put something in geostationary orbit. So we're going to go ahead to Mission Control and accept this contract. Gives us 2 years, and our destination is Earth orbit above 35,700 kilometers, eccentricity below 0.1, which is going to be meaningless, inclination below 3 degrees. So that's going to be one of the problems we'll face. The second problem we'll face is period between 23 hours 54 minutes and 23 hours 58 minutes. Now it's worth noting that neither of those figures are 24 hours. What it actually means to be in geostationary orbit is to match the actual rotation period of the Earth. Not the solar day, but the rotation period of the Earth. Because remember, as we're traveling around in orbit in space, orbiting around the Sun, each rotation that the Earth makes, we also move a little bit in our orbit. So the Sun is not the same place in the sky it was the prior day. That's why a solar day is 24 hours, but what's called the sidereal day is 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.1 seconds. It's like 4.096 something. Anyway, 4.1 is close enough. So our challenge is to place a satellite into orbit with that period. We also need to get our inclination below 3 degrees. That's tough because we're going to start with an inclination of 28.6 degrees because we're launching from the Cape. So let's go ahead and accept that contract. Now we get to design a geostationary satellite. So we're in the vehicle assembly building. There's 2 ways we can go about this. We can do the Russian approach, although the Russians didn't actually launch things into geostationary orbit because they were launching at like 51 degrees, and that's a right pain. They cared more about getting coverage either in Molniya orbits, which have the period of half a day, or later tundra orbits, which have a day-long period but are highly inclined and will generally sit either high above the Earth or high below the Earth to give polar coverage. So the Russian approach is you build your satellite just as a satellite. You have some sort of station-keeping propulsion on it, probably. Then you build a stage that gets it that will actually handle all the propulsive tasks, and then you build a launch vehicle to get that stage into orbit, or even to launch that stage out into a long transfer. The American approach generally has been that you build a satellite and a kick motor, and then you put that combination of things on what's called a geostationary transfer orbit. Now, you've seen me launch oftentimes to my usual around 185 by 185 orbit. That's a traditional 100 nautical mile parking orbit. 100 nautical miles is about 185 kilometers. That's sort of the historical standard for parking orbits, although sometimes you'd see a lower parking orbit where if you're really only going to be sticking around for half an orbit or less, then you can launch to, say, 160 and have lower gravity losses, get a little bit more performance. If you're going to be sticking in your parking orbit for a day or 2, you might want to be in 250 by 250 or even 300 by 300. 300 by 300 orbit is about the minimum you need to last a week in orbit. So anyway, so the American approach is you launch into a small parking orbit, and then as soon as you start passing down over the equator, and I think it's actually probably better if I just do this from the tracking station, I realize, instead of waving my mouse cursor around while I'm in the vehicle assembly building, which is not going to be fun for anyone. So we're in the tracking station, and this will make this explanation easier. Now, here, well, that's Africa. Well, you know what? Let's just warp until daylight. Who cares if we lose a half a day? We have 2 years to do this contract. All right, so here's the Cape. Nice green highlighted launch site. All right, so we launch due east, but as we've seen many times, gravity starts to pull us southward until we pass the equator. The point where you pass the equator is if we're going down the descending node. If you're going up, it's the ascending node. So in order to optimize the trajectory you fly, generally what you'd want to do from a launch site like the Cape is you launch and establish just a parking orbit, because you don't want to coast all the way to the descending node. You establish this parking orbit, and if you've seen some recent SpaceX launches, you've seen the Falcon 9 do this. So you establish a parking orbit, and in fact, we'll waste some more time and go ahead and align this orbital track right here, where is the satellite for it? Let's highlight that. Okay, that highlights that orbital path. Okay, so you can see that's fine. Okay, now we can actually see what's going on. So you see that this orbital track, it's going to go down past the equator, keep going down until it reaches its lowest point, starts going back up, and on the far side it will pass the equator going up again. Now we ask ourselves, how do we in fact go all the way out to about here but have a low inclination orbit? The way you do that is you time what's called your perigee kick, which is where you are at what will be your eventual perigee and you burn to establish a new apogee. You do that at the descending node. It's very important you do it there, because that puts your apogee far out here, say, at the same orbital location as your ascending node. And the reason you do that is because when you fire your kick motor at apogee, it's called an apogee kick motor. When you fire that kick motor, you're going to combine your burn to raise perigee up to geostationary height and go off the geostationary transfer orbit into an actual geostationary orbit. You're going to combine that burn with a plane change burn. And that plane change burn is going to lower your inclination from 28.5 degrees, which is probably what we'll be after we finish launching, down to 0 degrees. The reason you combine that is pretty simple vector math. If you think of a triangle, where one of so think of a right triangle. The side going straight up, that's going to be your plane change kick. In this case, actually, it's going straight down because we're at ascending node, but whatever. The side going out to the right is going to be the prograde component. That's going to increase your perigee up to geostationary height. Now, if you take the vector sum of those, i.e. the delta V you actually have to burn to produce the change in the orbit you want, that's going to be the hypotenuse, and you'll note that the hypotenuse is going to be rather less than the linear sum of the two other sides. So you save a considerable amount of delta V by combining your apogee kick and your plane change maneuver. Generally, going from, say, a 185 kilometer perigee up to geostationary height is going to be about 2,500 meters per second. Then apogee kick and plane change is going to be another 1860 or so meters per second. Now, it's worth pointing out that it's actually slightly more efficient to do a tiny bit of the plane change during your perigee kick, so that you don't have to do the full inclination change at geostationary height, but you still want to do most of it there. And the reason you're doing that inclination change out there, rather than at your perigee kick when you're at your descending node and still in low orbit is because, as you probably know even from playing KSP, it's much cheaper to change your inclination when you're traveling slowly, when you're way far out, than when you're in low orbit traveling at 7.7 kilometers per second. So that's the basic theory behind a geostationary launch from the Cape. If you're launching from Kourou, down here, there's much less of a plane change involved, so you save a lot of delta V. If you're launching from, say, Baikonur, you know, with, where are we? No, that's India, Satish Dhawan. Oh, it's got to be right. There's Baikonur. Thought so. Okay, that's high latitude, and they have to launch to an even higher inclination to avoid Chinese territory. In that situation, it is actually cheaper to launch to what's called superstationary orbit, if memory serves. It's basically an orbit even higher than geostationary, out to about, say, here, instead of only about here, where it's much, much cheaper to do the plane change. Then you come back down again to geostationary height, and at that point you burn radial as well as prograde to both lower your apogee and increase your perigee. So that's what you want to look at if you're at really high inclination. But we're at the Cape, so we can do that traditional maneuver where we establish an orbit, burn at the descending node, and then do the combined kick at apogee. It's worth pointing out another reason why you want to you might want to change your inclination ever so slightly when you're burning at your perigee kick is because you might have some excess propellant in your transfer stage. Remember, if we do this the American approach where there's a satellite with a kick motor of a specified size, and then we have a stage that does the transfer to geostationary transfer orbit, but then basically its job is done. So you might want to use up some of its propellant then. For example, if you had a hydrolock stage where the propellant boils off, you'd want to use that up then rather than waiting up until you get to geostationary height where presumably much of it's boiled off, and then it's not so useful. So let's go ahead and design our first geostationary comm satellite. So we're going to want 2 of these puppies, because we're going to want one. Well, actually, no, I think we probably can't afford 2 of them because they require 3 electric charge a minute. Now, what is that? That's 0.05 per second, so 50 watts. So I think we can probably only afford 1 of those dishes, and we'll need a lot of solar panels because even at maximum, this is only going to give us 12.6 watts. So yeah, we're definitely only going to want to do 1 of those dishes. Now, the other thing we can do is we're almost never going to be on the dark side because our orbital height is so high, so we really don't need much in the way of electric charge. Let's go down to ½ kilowatt-hour. Now, I believe we have hydrazine. Yeah, we used hydrazine. All right, so temporarily I'm going to add these there, although we'll move them later to the center of mass. Or actually, no, we may want them there. So switch to hydrazine, and we're going to fill this with hydrazine. Now, we know that the Scorpion B is not a terribly capable launch vehicle, all things considered. In fact, let's fill this with hydrazine for now. Not, oh, it's because it's not a service module. Okay. Now let's fill it with hydrazine. All right. How heavy are we? We're at 130 kilograms. And just to get a sense of delta V, the delta V we're actually going to have is going to be different because we still need to add all the solar panels and the regular antennas. But we can just do a rough estimate of how much delta V we have. 130 and 87. Okay, so a quick trip to the calculator says 130 over 87. Take the natural log of that, multiply by G0, and I can never remember hydrazine. I think it's what is 196, 198. Okay, times 198. That's 779 meters per second. So that's a considerable amount of station keeping delta V, assuming we even can do enough of a kick. So, question is, do we rely on the Altair working? I think it's fairly risky, but I'd rather do that than use baby sergeants. So let's go ahead and unlock the Altair. And let's look at what kind of delta V that gives us. 2087, so that is in fact enough for a kick. Now note that because we're just going to use the Altair, I mean, I will perform some research on it, but it's likely the first one will fail. We do have a year, so that's fine. All right, so now let's go ahead and get our Scorpion B and see just how much delta V we might have. And again, we have to remember to fill it. 9706, that is a depressingly small quantity of delta V, all things considered. So it looks like we might actually have to use the Altair as the kick motor to get us to complete our geostationary transfer orbit burn. Yeah, 9706, that decreases even more. So we'll really only have about 300 to 400 meters per second budget. It may just be that we're really being over ambitious in trying to do a geostationary launch from this launch vehicle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resave this with actually full propellant tanks so that I don't keep doing this. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our Catapult 3S. And now I'm going to put the Altair on here just to get a sense of how much mass we're talking about. Thrust limit it down to 0 because I don't want it. Oh, that doesn't actually phase mech jet. And we can't lock the tank. Well, I guess I'll just have to back compute. Let's extend this out until we're actually at about right. Okay, and we'll finish the last of the burn that way. All right. And you can see that the Altair is in fact a highly useful little kick motor because it will circularize about 160 kilograms and do the plane change. The only reason I'm leery of it is because I haven't flown it before. You just saw me unlock it, and therefore it is likely to fail the first flight or two, despite us probably doing some research on it, which I should remember to do right now. Um, so we'll let our researchers research it. So yeah, let's see what kind of delta V we have. We have 1858, barring that. Oh, that's right. Let's get rid of all our empty stages. Now, catapult 3s. Okay. That's 12,577, even without the Altair involved. So this launch vehicle now is, of course, quite overpowered for what we need. In fact, we probably maybe could do the transfer just with the... well, could we do... I don't think we can do both transfer and insertion. Actually, on my prior career, I think I figured out that you could, with only a few kilogram payload, you could in fact do the apogee kick with this stage as well. So you don't even need kick motor. But we will have an LV that overperforms. That's okay. It's okay to have something that overperforms every once in a while. Particularly if we happen to get an in-flight failure for some reason. So let's go ahead and set this aside. Before we do that, though, we need to add an extra stage in here because we're going to need to decouple that Altair. Now, in real life, the first geostationary satellite used, I believe, an Altair 2, but it used that as an additional perigee kick motor. And then it had a much smaller solid in the satellite that's circularized. So let's go ahead and design this. We know we want a total mass of 160 kilograms. So we know we're going to want rather less tank than that. Okay. Then we're going to want, I think, one of those that we then mount. We'll basically do something rather similar to what we did last time with our lunar satellite, where we have a couple of these right here as sort of our main engines. Now we are going to want to add a couple antennas, and we want them at 90 degrees. And now we get to add oodles of solar panels, and this is where it gets expensive. Let's see. So we're going to want so we really need to have some recharging capacity for our batteries. We're going to want about 55 watts. So 4 solar panels, even if they have perfect alignment, is going to be 48 watts. So we really need 5 facing. So let's see what we can do. And we also kind of want symmetry. So I think we're going to want to do like this. That's one. Let's move these the other way. Okay. And these out. And clone. Move those out. All right, and then lastly, our fifth. Okay, so that is acceptable. We're now up to 141 kilograms. So we do still have some budget. So let's add what we didn't have before, which was the orbital perturbation experiment, so that we can get all the science from space high. Although I think actually, no, we did that on our previous mission, so we don't have to do that now. And also, interestingly, when I was calculating, it's good that we're up to 60 watts, because these antennas do have some draw, don't they? They draw 0.09 a minute. And if memory serves, that's 1.5 watts. Yep. Okay, so 1.5 watts times, that's 3 watts, so now we're up to 54. So, yeah, we're actually right about at the limit. That's interesting. So let's go ahead and add, it will make it cost slightly more, but let's go ahead and have 6 per side. And that piece is annoying me no end. Also, why did I have single jets there? I think I wanted these. And we want to switch these to hydrazine. Most definitely. Okay. Now we can go ahead and put these on here. I guess we need a longer central spike. Also, I'm going to change it to gold foil because I forgot. Okay. That's way too long. Let's try something in between. Somewhere about like that. All right, now we go ahead and move these up. Come on. There we go. And move these up lastly. Bingo. There, that aligned quite nicely. So we're going to go ahead and put 2 of these here, and then 2 of these here. Okay, and we'll call this Skystar 1. And save it, because my luck with these things is not great. So I think our energy budget is going to be good. Now, it's shockingly expensive. It's $5 million already. Did I, in fact, go ahead and... Oh, I didn't even add those thrusters yet, did I? All right. Let's go ahead and add these thrusters. And make sure they're set to hydrazine. They are. Excellent. Now we'll go ahead and set them only on actuation. Whoops, wrong one. Yaw, pitch, roll, port starboard, dorsal fore aft. And the question is, do we want to actuate them by throttle like last time? I think we don't, because otherwise they'll be firing while the kick is ongoing, and nobody wants that. All right, and let's look at the mass, the center of mass on this thing. All right, so those are enough above the center of mass that we'll have some reasonable torque. Okay, I confess myself satisfied with this contraption. So we're going to add toggle and toggle. All right, and we're going to manually activate the dish because we don't want to be drawing 50 watts if we can help it. All right, so this will be our first geostationary satellite. Now we get to go ahead and add a decoupler, and we'll make it this type. No, wrong node. Right node. Much, much smaller. Okay, now let's find the Altair, put it down here. 1827 meters per second. That's interesting. That's lower. I guess this decoupler is fairly heavy. All right. So what we can do is we can reduce the load here slightly, I guess. No, wrong one. What if we just removed it? No, now we have too much. Even 10 liters. No, 12 liters. So actually, since we are going to probably use part of this stage, as I was talking about, to slightly decrease our inclination and perigee kick, 1827 might be about right. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. Now, it's worth noting that's 0.402 tons, 402 kilograms. That's way more than the avionics of this little early probe core can handle. So we're going to have to use this Abelstar stage to align us for apogee kick, and then just stage at apogee. Once we stage away our kick motor, then we'll have full control. So let's go ahead and disable the RCS propellants so they don't get used. Now, go ahead and put this on. And that is a comfortable margin, I think you could say. So yeah, let's go ahead and build a few of these. That is a very long payload fairing, but that is, of course, a very tall satellite. So yeah, it costs about 11 million funds. So we only can afford to build one of these at the moment, which means that we're first going to build a tiny little sounding rocket. Because we need to test out our Altair engines anyway. I forget what exactly the diameter is, but wait, why did that was stupid of me. We need to put this first. Yes, now we put this. Now we put this. Okay, that is a considerable quantity of delta V. this a little larger. Okay. And let's put a second one down here. That is a fairly cheap sounding rocket, as sounding rockets go. We still haven't unlocked the supersonic wings, so I guess we can't. Let's hope that this will be okay. So we want 3 of you. This is unacceptably gigantic. Let's see. Okay, and minimal length and some decent offset. Give it a name. And we need to spin this up slightly. Yeah. Okay, so let's... Okay, that will do. Now, I'm going to go ahead and simulate this. I generally don't simulate launch vehicles unless I'm really unsure about them. But I want to see whether those fins burn up. Let's find out. Okay, so here we go. Okay, second stage. Okay, so this is not an unreasonable sounding rocket. And happily, neither one of these things failed. So that gives me some faith. Let's look at what test flight says. 542.86 seconds MTBF. That's vaguely disturbing that the MTBF is that low. But yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to... Oh, all right, fine. We'll do it through KCT. Right, so let's go ahead and we're going to build a couple of these, which we Let's see how long until the research is done. Oh, it won't actually tell me. Well, we're going to warp like 5 days just to get some research done. I guess actually, no, we're going to wait a while. Let's check on the research. Says it's still going. I guess we have to go to the VAB to check on it. Let's look. All right, so that's about half researched. And that was what, all about 6 or 7 days. So let's warp a few more days. And now let's reorder our build list. So the work done on the Skystar 1 is going to be held. Waiting. Now let's accept a medium contract. 270, we should reach that. Yes, I do apologize for this interlude, but we kind of need to do it to make sure that our very expensive launch vehicle doesn't fail at the last moment. Because that would be both embarrassing but also vaguely catastrophic because we don't have the funding we need. Okay, now if my calculations are correct, we should be at... we're close enough to 2,500 that I kind of don't care. All right, so we'll go ahead and launch this. Okay. And that's burnout. So let's go ahead and launch the next, fire the next stage. We'll probably get a little precession, but it'll be okay. Yep, there's the precession as I expected. We'll be fine. As long as we get over 270, I'll be fine. Man, that's rather more than 300 kilometers. All right. And we'll go ahead and top the fairing sides. And for all the good it does, decouple this little itty-bitty sounding rocket core. Alright, so now we need to wait until we are at 270, which would be about now. We've completed that contract. We got the monies. We'll blow the thing. Okay, so that was good reliability on the Altair. Now we just need another one of these contracts. We don't want high because we can't do high. Can't do X-planes. There's a medium. 150. Oh, we'll make that, won't we? Okay, we'll do a night launch because why not? Okay, and we had a little bit of wobble on the pad because I didn't bother with launch clamps, and therefore this is going to be a fair bit off vertical, but that's okay. Heading southeast. Okay, and we'll fire the second. And I fired it a little bit before that first stage totally burned out, and that's because we were actually paying more in gravity losses from carrying that thing producing next to no thrust than we're gaining from the extra like 20 meters per second delta V in it. Okay, that's coming up nicely. Passing 60 kilometers. And even up here at 80 kilometers, there's enough drag to be lowering our apogee quite rapidly. All right, so we'll go ahead and separate those. Go back out to just the telemetry unit and mosey on up. Ah, and you can just see either what, I don't even know what direction I'm looking in. Either that's sunrise or sunset for somebody. So we've passed our required altitude. Could head on back to Space Center, let those burn up on the way down. So now we have just shy of enough funds to manage our buy a backup if this one fails. So let's once again plop this, and we're definitely going to get over that range as long as it doesn't fail. And let's get a sounding rocket medium. All right, so combined that should pay just enough for us to buy another one of these if we get a failure on this mission. So let's check out tech. We're almost ready for basic capsules. That's going pretty well. So let's warp to Skystar 1. Whoops, wrong one. Oh, interesting. 81 days. Well, hopefully we don't get a failure or we'll fail those sounding rocket contracts. Roll out. 82 days, 83 days, 84 days. We're really pushing it, guys. And I really want a day launch, so we're also going to waste a few hours doing that. Skystar 1, here we go. Right. So if memory serves, this is 100, 120, 40. This launch vehicle. Controls are all nominal. So let's do this thing. So we'll launch in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. Guys, why is MechJeb not actually Why do we not actually have any control? This confuses me deeply. But it appears that we don't actually have any control over anything. And I'm really not sure why that's going on. Oh dear. That was a serious problem. I really have no idea why that happened. Because yeah, we were within our avionics limits. I don't know. That's a great question. Okay, so let's look at exactly how long we have until the deadline on the sounding rocket contracts. It's the 27th of July. They come due in 4 days. That's nice. I want to see if I can quickly build one of our old standby launch vehicles. Old standby sounding rockets. And this is deeply confusing to me. The only thing I can think of, because these don't have anything action grouped anywhere here, they are set to full gimbal. Don't have KOS installed. KOS was causing problems last time. Only thing I can think of is maybe the top of this was wobbling some. So we're going to go ahead and add some struts. See if that helps. Right. Now let's look at what sounding rockets we have available. Where were we? The Warbler C. Was that the UG? No, I don't actually have any good sounding rockets, really. 5759. Okay, so right. Let's see what we can do here. And then an alter. And then a fairing base. Well, let's use the other one actually. One of you. This is what I get for not having enough reserve that I could build a backup unit. So, yeah. All right. We'll probably need 2 of those, actually. And that's an ungainly thing if I ever saw it. It's going to have a gigantic fairing. But that is more than enough delta V to reach any orbit we might desire. And it's cheap, too. Very cheap. Takes 12 days, so the question on my mind is, do I want to risk... Do I want to just fail those contracts and just build another Skystar, or do I want to rush build this thing such that it only takes, 2 days? That means I have to rush build about 85% of it. That is going to cost quite a pretty penny, but I think we'll just about break even on the contracts, and then we can always get some other contract that'll pay for the geostationary thing. So, yeah. I really hate failing contracts, so I'm going to do that. It is perhaps not the wisest choice I ever have made. Let's narrow this on down a bit. Okay. That will... Oh, and we don't have... Shoot, we don't have guidance, do we? No, we don't. Let's add some early guidance. Came in. Let me click on you. There we go. And is there a gap? Yes, there is a small gap. Come on. There. Goodbye, small gap. All right. That staging looks acceptable to me, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now I get to weep bitter tears of woe and rush build this. Rush build. All right, so that cost a ridiculous quantity of money, but it means at least we won't fail the contract, which was probably like objectively the incorrect decision. But, well, we'll have our reputation at least. All right, let's go ahead and, come on. All right. Okay. So we'll throttle up. And guys, oh, there it goes. Okay, it must have hit a launch clamp somehow. Ugh. Anyway. Okay. I'm just flying this on manual because I no longer have faith in MechJeb, and we're going to spin up slightly to aerodynamically stabilize a little bit. But, right, unless I'm holding the control down, we're not actually going to... Well, I can put in a little trim, and that'll get us spinning up. Just to keep us stable. Okay, now we have a decent spin. Coming up on burnout. We're at 65 kilometers. Let's go ahead at 70 kilometers. Let's ditch the fairings. And ignite. Again. Well, if nothing else, we're continuing to add flight data to these Altair kick motors. Alright, and we're passing the required altitude. So at least we didn't fail any contracts. Oops, I forgot I need to decouple as well, and that brings us up to an apogee of just over 7,000 kilometers. So we're going to ride on up. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. All right. And there we are. We've passed 5,700 kilometers and 280 kilometers. All right. Well, that was humiliating. But yeah, I really don't understand why things failed like that. So let's go ahead and what other contracts might we pick? Now, we could just grind some sounding rocket contracts, but Moon, Mars, science data from the surface of the Moon, all these things are hilariously optimistic. Well, I kind of hate to do this because it's kind of cheaty, but at this point I feel like the game has bugged me, so I will bug it. So we'll accept that contract. science data from space around the moon. And we will go procure some science data from space around the moon. Because conveniently that can be done. Okay. Now we need to wait until we have a connection, which 35 minutes. Yeah. So right about here. Let's warp here. Not sure why it's picking a low warp rate. This is going to take a while. So we'll just do it by hand. That's better. And let's analyze some telemetry. I'm sure somebody would love to read some telemetry. And sure enough, there we go. We've completed that contract. Okay, so I'm going to save the game just in case something else breaks on the next launch. What is it? 1955, 07, 29. All right, so we're going to go ahead and build this thing again, the Sky Star. Sky Star 2. And it is possible just that joint had some induced wobble. It's also, of course, possible that things are just busted, and I may just fly the ascent myself if I have to. I really like letting MechJeb do it, but I just have to do it myself. So let's go ahead and warp to this. Roll it out. Three days to roll it out. We really need to upgrade our build rate quite badly. That's really kind of ridiculous. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and let's look at the numbers here. Once we engage those engines, TF auto tuning, that's correct. We want to launch to 0 inclination. We are force rolls on, skip circulations on. These numbers look sane to me. We're going to show the ascent target. Throttle up, SAS on. Let's light the engines and lift off. All right, now under normal circumstances, MechJeb would be reporting the torque here. It's not. So we're going to use stock SAS, and now engage the autopilot. MechJeb is still not actually flying the craft. It looks like. Oh, maybe it is. Hard to say. No, it's not. MechJeb is not flying the craft. That confuses me badly. So, all right. No idea why that's happening. No, MechJeb is flying the craft. It's just we're not getting any... Oh. No, I know why this is, and this is a bug. So, yes, I will be back in a few minutes to conclude our geostationary launch, but in the meantime, thanks for watching. This proves that sometimes when I update RO but don't release it, I run into an issue. I was holding off releasing Realism Overhaul until after I went through this flight test. It's good I did, because it did show the problem that I kind of feared it might. So thanks for watching. I'll be back shortly with the next episode where we actually launch this to geostationary orbit. I'm glad to know that it wasn't necessarily a failure on my part or on MechJeb's part. It's because there's a misconfiguration of the gimbal for those engines. So see you all soon.